Good morning, guys. I'm going to be embarking on another Damascus project today. And today it is spirograph Damascus. It's going to be in 1080 and 15N20, so all hardenable alloys, which makes it a little bit more difficult than if you just take square stock and wrap it in nickel or something like that. So first of all, I can't buy square stock in the size that I might want, namely 3/8 inch square. I can't reasonably quickly buy 3/8 inch square pre-made 1080 square stock. So I'm going to be starting with a big built-up billet of 1080 square. A big rectangular cross-section billet of 1080, and then forging it down into long, thin, square rod stock. I really wish I had a rolling mill with square wire reduction rollers, but I don't. So it's going to be a lot of power hammer work, maybe a little bit of roll work. We'll see. But first, let's take a look at some of the math involved. I wanted to do a volume calculation for how big of a rectangular billet of 1080 stock I should start with. So let's check that out. So just a little bit of phone calculator and pen and paper stuff. A little long division, that kind of brought me back to grade school. At any rate, so I'm going to make a can, and in it I'm going to put 49 pieces of 3/8 inch square 1080. That's 7 by 7. I find that gives a good look for spirograph. Not too bold, not too fine. So if I'm going to need 3/8 square by 49 pieces by 7 inches long, how much 1080 am I going to need to start with volume wise? Well, after doing a bunch of math I won't bore you with, I've arrived at I need 42 cubic inches of 1080. So then I just got to figure out, with my width of stock, which is 1.5 inch, how tall and long of a billet do I need to make up 42 cubic inches. So I went with a 4-inch tall billet by 1.5 wide by 7-inch long, gives me 42. And I'm going to add a little bit just for scale loss and end cuts and general waste. So I'm probably going to go up to 45. I'm going to just add a couple 3 layers of 1080 onto that billet just to bulk it up a little bit. And actually a 4 1/4 or 4.5 inch tall billet, 7 inches long of 1080 isn't that unreasonable of a beast to handle. I'm going to weld it up, draw it out reasonably far, maybe to 1.5 inch or something. Try to get it out to a clean 1.5 inch bar with no taper, and then lop that in half. Then I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to have 2 pieces, each of which will become 25 of these ultimate pieces of 3/8. And so I'll have 1 left over, but it just makes the math a lot easier, just for kind of like measuring hot bars and rip and chopping them with a chop saw. So then once I get each of those 2 bars drawn out to however long they want to be by 3 feet, whatever a reasonable length to handle them is, I'll then chop each of those. Say if it's 3 feet, then I'll chop each one of them into 6-inch lengths, and then I'll have to forge each of those 6-inch lengths into 5 equal pieces. So it's going to be a long day or 2 of just forging 1080 down into square bar stock. And then once I get all that, I'll cut it all up to equal lengths, and I will start on my 15N20, and that becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full width sheets of 15N20 to fit down into that can. And then a whole lot of these tiny little guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 6, 36 of these little 3/8 wide by 6-inch long strips of 15N20, and I can't really plaz those because plaz warps them too much, so it's just going to be all like angle grinder cut strips. So that's also going to be tedious. That's a reason I don't make this pattern very much, but the bug kind of bit me on this. I want to see if I can make it a little bit better than this time than I have before. So that's what we're going with, and I'm going to occasionally give you progress reports because it's going to be a boring and horrible process, and you just get to see the highlights, so goody for you. Well, my thinking has already changed. So, rather than draw one giant billet of 1080 out, which is pretty tall for the forge and kind of unmanageable, it would be handleable, but it's just a whole lot of chopping and reheats just to get to the point where we have 5 separate pieces. So what I'm going to do is make 5 separate 1080 billets of the same amount of pieces. Calculated the volume, it's a little bit over, just for good measure. And then I'm going to weld and draw each of these out to, say, 30 inches. And cut those into 5 equal pieces each, so say 6-inch pieces. And then I'm going to have 25 pieces at that point. What I want ultimately is 50 pieces, and so I'm just going to need to cut each of those pieces in half after drawing them a little farther. So it's a couple heat cycles rather than just a bunch of heat cycles to draw this big bar down and then chop it in half and then draw it way down and then chop it in 5 and then draw it way down more. So we're just going to heat these up maybe 3 at a time and then 2 at a time in the forge and draw each one out to about 30 inches. And boom, we're ready to go into the fire. Got them buzzed up, handles on, weld's taken down a little bit, and my thinking has changed again. I'm going to weld and draw each of these out to, perhaps 20 inches. Then I'm going to chop each one of them in half so I have 10 pieces, 10 inches long, and each one of those is going to get drawn into 5 pieces. Seems a little bit more manageable that way yet. Got the forge fired up. We're running hammers right now, so I'll put the cam on the Niles Bement and show you a little bit of welding and drawing one of these billets a bit. Now you'll be able to see I've been putting some more work into this hammer. I added wood wedges all the way around in addition to the steel wedges. I put a bunch of work into the lower die and stuff. You can see everything is much more solid and the anvil's not really moving around on this. It's hitting way harder. I've resurfaced the dies and everything, so it's become more and more useful. It's pretty fun to use. Now we're going to go over to the Baudry as the Bement actually builds up air again and weld a bigger billet of what'll be W's on that. This right here was the first weld of what ultimately got restacked up to 16 layers, I think, 17 layers of W's. I'm just showing this first weld. I did the rest off camera on this billet, forged the corners in, crushed it sideways, restacked it twice. So it was 17 layers to begin with, I think, and then I restacked it twice for 16 layers of 17 W's, or I don't know how to put that. Anyway, you'll see it later. Here it's the next day. Different shirt,
pants, etc. And I'm continuing working on square bars, forging them out. Got this one out to nearly 1/2 inch. I got several of those that I'm working on here, and I finished them up, forging them to each other, using the first one as a kiss block to set the next bar to, etc.
Well, here's the results of all the initial toil on drawing out some square stock. So these are just slightly under 1/2 inch. Left some room to grind them in because they all got to get cleaned up here. I have 10 pieces and they're each 18 inches long. So a little shorter than planned, but no big deal. We can cut them all into 5 pieces still easily enough. And now I'm just going to deck this whole side, flip them all, deck the other side, and so on and so forth until we have 4 clean sides by whatever dimension that gives us. As long as it's 3/8 or greater, I'll be happy. Probably a little bit bigger than 3/8. And then we'll get to chopping some 15 and 20, and then manufacturing a can after all that. So here we have just spent 1/2 a day grinding all 4 sides of all 10 of these bars completely clean and square within 1/1000th of each other. And so these are 0.398 square. And so that puts us like 20 thou, 23 thou over our target thickness, and that is also fine. Now I'm going to chop each one of these 10 up into 5 pieces of just over 3 inches, about 3 1/4-ish. And then we'll have all the bits that we need, the 49 bits that we need to make our 7x7 can, and then it's 15 and 20 cut. Here is our stack of little square blocks, 7x7. And I've been doing a little math here. So first of all, 0.398 square, 0.398 one way, times 7 is 2.786. So that's the dimension square here without shims. The stock I'm going to use, the 15 and 20, is 73 thou thick. So 73 thou times 6 is 0.438. So I add this plus the shims that'll be in there. I get 3.224 will be the finished width each way of the billet inside the can. So rounding that up for now, 3 1/4 inch. That will be the width of the main shims I'll need. 3 9/16. This is the length of the billet here. By 6 pieces. That's 6 layers of shims to intersperse all of them one way. We're gonna have wide flat shims up one side and then skinny ones filling it in the other way. So now I have my cut list for the first series of shims.
So I have that first layer of wide shims cut to go one direction in the grid. And you can see I left them extra length because the squares are going to get padded out the other direction with the other shims.
So this is a jig that I've just reamed up for cutting strips from annealed 15 and 20. These are just lightly fusion tacked together all the way around a stack of plates, and now I'm just going to cut strips. This sled has slots in it that I can feed these across, so it's a little clamping table that I can keep bringing the clamps up tighter and bring this material forward to keep cutting stacks of strips off of it for my spirograph Damascus. So let's give this a shot. Feed it back a little, lay it on, and here we go. Hope it works. Now all I gotta do is surface grind them sideways to width.
Having ground all 42 narrow strips to width, I have now interspersed them throughout the billet, and here is our finished billet prior to canning. With the can mostly built around it, now I've blocked it in on the mag chuck and I'm grinding just the top end flush before I put a lid on it.
Yeah, lots of prep into this bugger. Just shy of 4-inch square, can fabricated from plate, and inside of it, 7x7 spirograph layup of 1080 and 15N20 to get welded up and then twisted later. So that's pretty neat.